Well, ladies and gentlemen, it would seem as if yet another one of our Supreme Court justices is actively working to undermine President Trump, and this time it's Justice Sotomayor. You see, just the other day, Justice Sotomayor got caught actually publicly encouraging the federal judiciary to continue subverting President Trump's America First agenda. But before we get to that, we need to talk about one of President Trump's bombshell new plans. 2 days ago, Stephen Miller announced that the Trump administration is considering suspending habeas corpus for illegal aliens in order to restore America's national sovereignty. And right now, the radically progressive globalists are absolutely losing their minds. Now, simply put, habeas corpus is what preserves an individual's right to due process, preventing them from being wrongfully detained. But here's the thing. Article 1, Section 9, Clause 2 of the United States Constitution clearly states, "The privilege of the writ of habeas corpus shall not be suspended unless, when in cases of rebellion or invasion, the public safety may require it." And so, as you all know, Joe Biden and the Democrats quite literally facilitated an invasion across our southern border, allowing 20 million illegal alien invaders to enter our country, many of whom are cartel gang members and members of terrorist organizations. So, folks, I want you all to take a listen to what Stephen Miller himself had to say about all of this. Then, we're going to have a lot to talk about.
Well, the Constitution is clear, and that, of course, is the supreme law of the land, that the privilege of the writ of habeas corpus can be suspended in a time of invasion. So I would say that's an option we're actively looking at. Look, a lot of it depends on whether the courts do the right thing or not. At the end of the day, Congress passed a body of law known as the Immigration and Nationality Act, which stripped Article 3 courts, that's the judicial branch, of jurisdiction over immigration cases. So Congress actually passed, it's called jurisdiction stripping legislation. It passed a number of laws that say that the Article 3 courts aren't even allowed to be involved in immigration cases. Many of you probably don't know this. I'll give you a good example. Are you familiar with the term temporary protected status, or TPS, right? So by statute, the courts are stripped of jurisdiction from overruling a presidential determination or a secretarial determination on TPS when the Secretary of Homeland Security makes that determination. So when Secretary Noem terminated TPS for the illegals that Biden flew into the country, when courts stepped in, they were violating explicit language that Congress had enacted, saying they have no jurisdiction. So it's not just the courts aren't just at war with the executive branch, the courts are at war, these radical rogue judges, with the legislative branch as well, too. So all of that will inform the choices the president ultimately makes, yes.
So, folks, there's a lot to break down here, but before we do, I want to say real quick that if you guys enjoy the daily news updates, please consider subscribing to the channel because it really does help a ton. But okay, yes, habeas corpus protects against unlawful detention, ensuring due process, but when 20 million illegal aliens have invaded our country, threatening the safety of hardworking Americans and putting our national security at risk, President Trump has the absolute right to act decisively by suspending habeas corpus for all of these illegal invaders. And keep in mind, just a couple months ago, President Trump officially designated the entrance of these 20 million illegal aliens as an invasion. And this is a designation that has been subsequently upheld by our U.S. Supreme Court. So given all of that, President Trump absolutely has complete constitutional authority to suspend habeas corpus for everyone that has illegally invaded our country. But as all of this is unfolding, radically progressive federal judges are waging war on President Trump's ongoing deportation efforts. Their nationwide injunctions and flippant habeas corpus rulings are deliberately obstructing his constitutional obligation to safeguard the United States from the invasion that the radical progressives ultimately facilitated. And so once again, the Constitution grants President Trump the supreme power to suspend habeas corpus during an invasion with unwavering constitutional clarity. The Constitution is very explicit about this. In fact, ladies and gentlemen, take a look at this. Habeas corpus has been suspended 4 times already throughout our country's history. In 1861, during the Civil War, to detain Americans suspected of working for the Confederacy. In 1871, to combat the KKK during the post war Reconstruction era, in 1905, in the American controlled Philippines to suppress a local insurrection, and in 1941, after Pearl Harbor, to detain Japanese Americans. And so each of these times, habeas corpus was suspended in order to immediately address various threats to public safety. And also, worth noting, 3 out of the 4 times that habeas corpus has been suspended in US history, it's been suspended to detain American citizens on US soil. So when you consider that precedent, it's not outlandish or authoritarian by any means whatsoever for President Trump to suspend habeas corpus to rightfully detain illegal aliens who aren't even American citizens or in our country legally. In truth, if President Trump were to suspend habeas corpus to detain and deport illegal aliens, it would be the least authoritarian suspension of habeas corpus in all of American history. But okay, ladies and gentlemen, here's something else I want you to take a look at. Just the other day, Supreme Court Justice Sonia Sotomayor spoke at an American Bar Association conference saying the following: "Our job is to stand up for people who can't do it themselves, and our job is to be the champion of lost causes. But right now, we can't lose the battles we are facing, and we need trained and passionate and committed lawyers to fight this fight. With all the uncertainty that exists at this moment, this is our time to stand up and be heard. For me, being here with you is an act of solidarity." So, ladies and gentlemen, now one of our Supreme Court justices is explicitly calling for the federal judiciary to fight against and to undermine the President of the United States as well as the democratic will of the American people. In reality, Supreme Court Justice Sotomayor's call for judges to fight President Trump's agenda exposes her shameful judicial partisanship. As a Supreme Court justice, she's sworn an oath to impartially uphold the U.S. Constitution, but now she's openly calling for federal judges to undermine President Trump, our democratically elected leader. So here's the truth. What she's doing right now is betraying the oath that she swore when she stepped into the Supreme Court. And I'll tell you what, the consequences of this are absolutely massive. Now, all of these radically progressive federal judges, emboldened by Supreme Court Justice Sotomayor's radical rhetoric, are effectively attempting to execute a judicial coup. They're trying to seize powers reserved for the executive and legislative branches, defying the Constitution's very clear, very delineated boundaries. Here's the reality. Illegal aliens, by nature of their illegal presence in our country, forfeit the same due process that we constitutionally afford to citizens or legal residents. Really, deportation is an administrative, executive process, not a criminal or judicial process, which means that President Trump has complete and total constitutional authority to deport every single one of these illegal invaders. And so here's the fundamental truth. President Trump's deportation initiatives are absolutely crucial to protecting American communities from the crime and economic damage caused by the unchecked illegal alien invasion that the Democrats allowed to take place. Which means, right now, all of these radically progressive federal judges, Democrat politicians, and Supreme Court justices that are working to block President Trump's deportation efforts are actively putting the well-being of illegal aliens, illegal invaders, above the well-being of everyday American citizens. Really, they're betraying their oath to the U.S. Constitution as well as to the American people. And let's be very clear about something. For years, the radical progressives ignored federal immigration law, letting 20 million illegal alien invaders swarm into our country without a single concern for due process. Only now that President Trump is attempting to apprehend and deport all of the illegal alien invaders that the Democrats let into the country, now do they pretend that they care about due process. Unluckily for them, however, Americans see right through their fake, hypocritical concern. So, folks, here's the truth. Justice Sotomayor's Supreme Court activism is actively fueling a radically progressive judicial plot to subvert and to sabotage President Trump's America First policies. They've traded their constitutional loyalty for a radically progressive anti American agenda. And so here's my opinion. Suspending habeas corpus is an absolute necessity to stop these activist courts from paralyzing President Trump's deportations. We can't let progressive judges hold our nation hostage while illegal alien invaders are overrunning our communities. So, you know what? Between you and me, I hope that President Trump actually does it. I hope that he suspends habeas corpus and then deports every single one of these illegal alien invaders from our country, because I'll tell you what, that is what it means to put America first. Now, ladies and gentlemen, before we wrap up, I do want to say real quick that we officially have a Morse News Twitter page as well as a Morse News Facebook page. So if you use either of those platforms, please go down below and drop a follow in order to get breaking news updates that relate to everything we talk about here in the YouTube videos. But everyone, that is going to be a wrap for today's video, so please go down below and drop a comment. Let me know what you think about all of this. Please like the video while you're down there, and like I said earlier, please consider subscribing to the channel because it really does help a ton. Thank you all very much for tuning in today, and of course, as always, stay safe.